Hello and welcome everyone to Think Chatbot number 7. As usual, this is myself, Alex de Becker from ubisend, and I'm joined with Jacob. Do you want to say hi, Jacob?
Hi there, everyone. Hope you're all doing well.
Very nice. And for those of you who are joining us right now, I can see people saying hi in the chat. Hi, everyone. We run these videos, we run these events live every Tuesday at 1 o'clock UK time, where we try to build a bot within about 45 minutes. And so for the next 45 minutes, what we're going to witness is basically myself and Jacob going through a bit of a use case. I reckon we'll probably do something in HR again, a use case and that Jacob has put together, and I'm going to try my best to build it somewhat quickly within the ubisend platform. So what are we building today, Jacob?
So you're hot on the money when you said it was probably going to be something else in HR. Today we're looking at reporting sickness, so helping employees be able to report sickness, guiding them through that flow. The reason that we're tackling this one today is actually because reporting sickness, it can take up quite a bit of time from HR and a line manager, and there's kind of underlying issues with it from a lot of companies that we've been speaking to. We found that sometimes sickness isn't reported properly, maybe like it's just a text to a line manager and it doesn't go anywhere, it's not recorded down. It becomes very difficult for HR and say the wider business as a whole to kind of keep a track on how the sickness is actually going, whether it's a problem or maybe not a problem. So it's quite nice because with a chatbot, you can kind of take that and give it kind of a uniform sense so that you know every single employee is going through the exact process you want them to. So it's a really nice way, quite a simple use case, but a nice way to kind of add some uniformity, I think that's a word, to across your whole business there.
You're asking a foreign person whether some word is English or not. I'm not sure I'll be able to help with that. This is good. So this is the type of use case that will not only save time right now for your business, as people just use the bot instead of wasting human time to do these sort of things that can be automated, but also it's going to save time in the long run because we're going to be able to automate things in a very specific format, knowing that there's not going to be any human error creeping into the middle of the process, which is obviously really, really good. I've seen the chat is going quite quickly, but I've seen someone ask if there was other recordings of HR sessions we've done. I would say probably that most of the videos we've done so far are HR related. They're all on our YouTube channel. So if you go on YouTube, type ubisend, or if you will receive an email after this with I would assume a link from Jacob. So you can go on YouTube, find ubisend, and just look for the playlist called Think Chatbot, and you'll be able to find all of them. But yeah, we mostly do HR content so far. Okay, so should we get started?
I think so. Let's dive straight in.
All right, cool. So this is the Miro board. So Jacob, do you want to walk us through what you're trying to achieve here?
Yeah, of course. So as you can see from the Miro board on the screen here, we've got the kind of initial trigger for the conversation, which is a user says that they're off sick. And then obviously this can come in at any time of the day, whether it's 5 a.m. or 10 p.m. And then the chatbot's going to kind of gather the reason for sickness. And then so this might be something, I think for the purpose of the video, we'll kind of probably keep just a few examples, but I know for a lot of businesses, there'll be kind of quite a long list of reasons that a user can pick from. And then obviously as well, the chatbot's going to ask if the user is self-certifying. So just another little tick box, so to speak, or a step that businesses like to have on note. And then also check if the user has a doctor's note or if that's applicable, because especially for say like longer periods of sickness, this is something which can be very important. And then the chatbot's also going to ask how long the user expects to be off. And from this stage, we're going to kind of take down two different routes depending on the user's answer. If it's, say, a minor illness, such as something which is less than 3 days, we can just inform their line manager so they know they're not going to be in for the day. But if it's something more than 3 days, which might be a bit more serious, we'll inform the line manager and HR there, but ideally doing that autonomously.
Okay, perfect. So that looks like a really straightforward type of process, which is the type of processes that obviously you can really easily automate with a bot. So that's perfect. So let me move to the platform. I've messed up and completely put my microphone just in front of my face, which means that I can't actually reach my laptop, which doesn't help to actually build the bot. So now I have moved. Sorry if you've had loads of noises there. Hopefully that wasn't too overpowering. Okay, so we're now in the ubisend platform. Obviously, the ubisend platform is where we're going to build this fantastic bot. This is a type of a small process, so we can do this in, I reckon, one conversation. We're gonna go through that together. For the purpose of this episode, as usual, we've created a brand new ubisend account, which means that it doesn't have any metrics on the dashboard. It doesn't have any conversations. It doesn't have any FAQs. So obviously, as we always mention, but we do have some conversations by default, but there's nothing too specific here. These are the default conversations that every single ubisend account would get at the start. But as you can see, there's absolutely no FAQs. There's nothing in here, no integrations, which again, nothing in here. So we're starting completely from scratch, which is good for these episodes because it allows you to see the entire process. Okay, so for this, what we're going to do is we're going to build this whole conversation in, I think we're going to do it in one flow. So the reason I'm pausing here is because obviously at the end of this conversation, we have a branching here. Those of you who were in last week's session will remember that we went through an entire flow together, and then towards the end, I sort of threw a spanner in the works and said, well, what we've done here is good for a one-time build of a chatbot. But if we wanted to be really scalable with it, we should have actually built this conversation in multiple phases, multiple conversations. Anyway, you can go back and watch this one. It was actually, I think, really, really educational, and we got loads and loads of good feedbacks from that section, from that session. So if you'd like, go and watch it. But for this one in particular, I think that the whole conversation can be done at once, particularly because towards the end we only have a branching that will really have a very minor impact. So we're going to contact different people based on how much time the person or the employee needs to be off. And so as we'll see, this is probably going to be just one step of the conversation that needs to be branched off. So we probably don't need to create multiple conversations. So all of this to say, for the people who are with us pretty much every week, you can expect something a bit different than from last week. Okay, does that make sense, Jacob?
All makes sense to me.
Perfect. I was hoping you would talk a little bit so that I could have a sip of water, but now everyone heard me have water.
No, that's creepy timing, because I think you literally caught me the second that I was just finishing having a sip of water there. So I think we managed to cross swords slightly.
Okay, perfect. So in the ubisend platform, I'm going to go and build this conversation. So to do this, I just go into the chat section and the conversation builder. Obviously, that makes sense. So like I mentioned, there's a few conversations in here. We're not going to have a look at it. They're just here by default. You can delete them. You can edit them as much as you'd like. For now, we're not going to have a look at that. So what I'm going to do is create a new conversation. So in here, you have to imagine that this is your HR chatbot. So you have a license to the ubisend platform. You're head of HR or HR manager or employee experience manager, something like that. And so within your platform, within your ubisend platform, you will have not only this sickness leave conversation, but you'll also have many other conversations, which again, you can go onto your YouTube channel and you'll see all of the other ones we've been building. But for this specific one, what I'm getting at basically is you want to give these conversations quite a descriptive name. So for this one, we're going to call it sickness leave request. Would that make sense?
Yep, that makes sense.
I guess you've just named this Think Chatbot number 7, so that doesn't really help me. And then we're going to describe what this conversation does. So I quite like to start these descriptions with this conversation helps employees notify their manager and or HR that they are off sick. Okay, so very descriptive, as you can see. Very simple. It's going to help us skim through the content later on. If we have many conversations, we can find exactly the one we're looking at, we were looking for. And now we get to the trigger. So as usual, we're going to build a conversation that revolves around a trigger. Every single conversation needs to have a trigger. That makes sense. This trigger could be many things. So as usual, I'm going to click on this link on this drop down here, and you'll see that there's a whole bunch of events I could use to trigger a conversation. So it's not just the person says a specific word and this conversation triggers. Actually, you can use many different things. So you can say the employee returns after in the morning, or an integration has failed, or live chat is available, or there's all sorts of things that you can do. You can even do things based on page URL, the user's IP, payments. Obviously in HR that wouldn't probably make sense. API requests. So if you had a connection with SuccessFactors or something like that, you could do all sorts of things here. For the purpose of this demonstration, as usual, again, we're going to do this based on a specific keyword. The reason we're doing this is that it allows us to test the bot we're building really, really easily, which makes it the experience of this session just a lot easier. So here we're going to do, if a message is sent to the bot that is equal to TC7, which is obviously Think Chatbot 7, we're going to start this conversation. So what would be a typical trigger for this, Jacob, if we weren't building this for a session, for a demonstration?
Well, I suppose it can either be, say, coming from an FAQ, such as I feel sick, or maybe I won't be in work today, or I'd like to report my sickness. So you can kind of have those kind of more conversational keywords there that a user would naturally put into the chatbot. Or you might also say have them coming from a slightly different conversation flow, where maybe they were just asking about the different reasons for sickness, and you might want to be able to branch them into this from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So the when we were looking at the graph earlier, or this chart earlier, this very first section is basically, it could be many different things. So like Jacob said, it could be an FAQ, it could be specific keywords, it could be someone landing on the URL that is, on your internal website, on your internal portal, employee portal. You might have report sickness or something like that. So if they land there, you could have this conversation pop up. So this very first trigger here at the top can be many different things. The point I'm trying to make is that you don't want to think that this only can start with someone saying the exact word sick or something like that, because that's not the purpose of a chatbot, obviously. Okay.
I suppose as well, quite the nice thing about using the conversation builder for this is you can maybe even create separate conversations depending on when the user's reporting sickness. So like say you might have a slightly different, say, imagine if this request kind of comes in through during the day, you might want to have a step in there, which is like, are you currently at work and you want to leave work early to go home due to sickness, or are you currently just reporting having never been in work? So it kind of gives you that flexibility.
Yeah, definitely. Or you could have handing over to an HR person through live chat at some point during the conversation if this is during working hours. All that sort of stuff is possible. Okay, so I'm going to save this, which is going to create the bare bones of our conversation. So as you can see, the conversation is now created. We have a little success message. We have the conversation trigger at the top. We have a little arrow pointing to the first step of the conversation, which just literally just says an example message. So evidently we're going to have to edit this. But it's interesting to keep an eye on the different visual elements here that show you what you're trying to build. So obviously you have the trigger at the top, you have the arrow, you have a little plus button here. So we could add a step between these two steps, which we're not going to do. You have a plus button here at the bottom. So you could add a step below the first step, which is obviously something we're going to do. And then you have this indicator here in the middle that just says when a message is equal to TC7, we're going to move to step 1. So all of this is different little UI tips that shows you exactly what you're building. And we obviously have the name of the conversation here at the top left, which is helpful as well. Okay, so what would be the first step we need to build, Jacob?
So by this point, the user's already kind of entered the conversation saying that they are off sick. So I think the chatbot's going to want to gather the reason for sickness and probably give the user kind of quite a few different options, or maybe the option to say like type their own answer as well.
Okay, so this very first message here, we're going to go and edit that. So this message has been created by the platform by default, which is why it has step 1 and just an example message as the actual copy. We can change all of that, obviously. So here we're going to gather sickness detail. That sounds weird, but this is just going to be the step detail. So that's the name of the step. This isn't something that the users will see. It's just for your own benefit. So if I save this and close it, as you can see, this name here has changed, which again allows me to navigate this conversation builder a lot easier. So what we're going to do is we're going to ask the user for basically what's wrong with them. So we can have a bit of empathy here. I'm sorry to hear that. Could you specify what is wrong? What's wrong? Yeah, I guess that works. Okay, I'm sorry to hear that. Could you specify what's wrong? So in this instance, what we have here, what I've written here is basically a standard message. So as you can see, there's 2 drop downs here at the top. We have message type and composer type. Within the message type, we have many different options. Well, I say many. We have 10 different options. So you have standard, which is literally just a plain text message. We have quick replies, which would allow me to add some buttons like this. We have actions, which would allow me to add bigger buttons like this, which has either a postback or an URL in the back, which is quite helpful as well. We can see that later on. We have general, which would allow me to add a link, an image, which is very nice. We have plain images. So if we just want to add an image, plain videos, progress and payments, which we're not necessarily going to use in HR specifically. So unfortunately, perfect. So for now, we've just used a standard message, but doing so would basically allow the user or the employee to type whatever it is that they want as an answer to this, which isn't a bad thing necessarily. But to go back to what we were saying during the introductions, what we want to try and do is processize as much as possible using the bot, because we know that there's not going to be any human error. So if the employee wanted to say that they have migraine, they could say migraine, or they could have really low migraine and just say migraine, or they could make loads of spelling mistakes, which doesn't really matter. But what we want to do is make sure that the data we gather is actually really accurate. And so for this instance, what we could do is provide some buttons to the user. So like I said, quick replies allow us to add these short little buttons up to 10, which should be more than enough for the main sort of reasons for sickness at work. So just give me a few, Jacob.
And try to we'll just kind of go with the typical ones for the sake of the video. So flu there.
Flu.
And then I think, like you mentioned, migraine or headache.
Migraine. Yep.
And then say like a cough or cold.
Cold. Yep.
Yeah, I think we can probably call it a 3 there, because I think just for the sake of the video, we'll just put a couple examples in.
Perfect. So flu, migraine, cold. Perfect. I guess one that you mentioned during the introduction, which I think would make a lot of sense here, is to have another button for something else. So typically, employees won't necessarily want to share so much details with the bot, or even with a human staff. Sometimes every now and then they will just want to say, something's wrong with them. This could be personal information that they don't necessarily want to share publicly or disclose to another human being, or even for that matter, a chatbot. And so obviously adding an option that is just something else, or I'd rather not say, might make sense as well. So we could have this option as available here. One thing that I think is could be valuable to have a look at is, give me another example. What else could go wrong?
Oops, sorry.
What else could go wrong?
You could just have an injury.
Injury. Okay.
It's one of those moments where all of a sudden you forget every single type of reason somebody might not be at work.
Yeah, I'm just tired. That's it. That's it. Okay, so we won't go into that, because I think that's going to take us over our time. So we'll just leave it to flu, migraine, cold, and then I'd rather not say. So again, the appeal for doing this quick reply approach is threefold. The first one is it's going to help people just literally just click what's wrong with them. There's no way, there's no other way to make this process simpler than that. So you prevent them from having to type. If they're truly not well, they don't want to type. If they can just click a button, it's just so much easier. Their thumb is just there. They can click the button. Second reason is we can actually log the information in a set format. So we know that migraine is going to be migraine all the times and not just a headache. And then the third reason is if I save this and actually go and test this bot, you will see what I mean from this. So I can say TC7, which is the trigger. Okay, what's wrong with you? So I have all of these options here, which I can obviously type. But then if I want to, I can say, I can type bellyache. And I can just send that. No, obviously that's not going to do anything now, because I haven't created anything after that. But my point here is that you're not preventing the employees from actually reporting something else that might be going wrong, that they don't necessarily have, that you don't necessarily have as an option. So you can still capture that information without necessarily having to present all of the possible sicknesses that you might have at the moment. I think, Jacob, you mentioned yesterday when we were discussing this, that at a previous job you had like the longest form of drop down of all the things that could be going wrong.
Yeah, I think it was easily over kind of 50 different types of sickness that I could have chosen from. So it was a very in-depth and thorough list there.
Exactly. So obviously you don't want to do that. You want to present the ones that are that make sense, that are more frequent, and then you want to leave them the opportunity to free text something else if they want to add something else. Okay, so that's step number one. Perfect. Step number two. Chatbot asks if user is self-certifying. Okay. So what we're going to do is obviously use our conversation builder, a nice little neat plus button here at the bottom, and we're going to ask, I already forgot what it was, self-certifying. So again, this is the step title. So this is just an internal name for ourselves. And then what we're going to do is we're going to look at the transition. The transition is basically the way that the employee or the chatbot user is going to move from the previous steps, the previous step they were on, to the current step you're creating right now. So this is to get to this step, a user has to ... from the gathered sickness detail. If any of the following conditions are met, the user is going to move to the new step we're creating. So here at the moment, it's if a message is sent, they're going to move to the next phase. So what I want to have a look at here is, do we need to do any validation? So in this particular instance, like I said, they could have sicknesses that are presented in the buttons. They could have sicknesses that they don't want to disclose, or they could have typed something completely free text that you wouldn't necessarily specifically expect someone to say. So all this to say that for these three things to work, what we want to do is we want to just basically move the user along whatever it is that they answer. So we don't want to put any validation. We don't want to just sniff out for the word flu or sniff out for the word cold, because that would prevent people from moving forward if they have a bellyache, and obviously that would be very, very annoying for the user. So we don't want to do that. So we just want to move them forward whatever it is that they say. So if a message is sent, we're gonna move the user to the next step. Perfect. Okay, so what are we asking here, Jacob?
Yeah, so this basically just taken actually, as I mentioned from our previous work here, where you just kind of make sure that the user is self-certifying that they are the ones that are sick. So just another quick question here.
Okay. Are you self-certifying? Okay, and then, so I guess this would be a yes or no answer.
Yeah, essentially, yeah, you want this to be quite standardized.
Okay, so we do the same process, yes, no, create. Create. I didn't click the button. Okay, perfect. So we ask for what's wrong with them. They provide us with an answer. Whatever that is, we're going to move them to the next phase of the conversation. And now we're asking them if they're self-certifying. Again, yes, no, doesn't really matter at this stage. We're just collecting this data as the chatbot. We're just collecting this data. We don't necessarily want to act upon, at least based on this flow that was provided to me. We're not necessarily acting differently based on the answer of the user. So whether it is yes or no, we're going to still move them forward in the conversation. 2, the chatbot asks if a doctor's note is applicable. Okay. We can follow the same process. So we have still this plus button here. We're going to ask doctor's note. Again, the step title. They could be yes or no. So we're just going to follow the same process and just move the user forward, whatever it is that they say. So we're going to continue that. And then what would be the question?
Do you have a doctor's note?
Okay. So again, my T key on my keyboard is a bit broken. So again, this would be a yes or no answer. So we're going to follow the same process. Yes. No. Okay. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it all makes sense to me. I think it's quite a nice point as well to point out that although the flow that we're working from at the moment is quite, I say, more of a simple flow in terms of things, it would be quite nice obviously in the real world, you'd be maybe having different branches depending if the doctor's note is or is not supplied. Yeah, every single one of my words then.
No, that's fine. I was just reading the chat as you were talking, and the chat scrolled up now, so I can't find it. But someone called Thomas was asking whether we always have to provide buttons. And I suppose you joined a little bit late, but the consensus is you don't necessarily need to provide buttons, but it just makes the user experience a bit better if you do in certain instances, particularly if you want to capture the information in a really consistent format throughout this process. Okay, so hopefully that answers your question. Doctor's note, yes, no. And then we're moving on to ask how long they're expected to be off. So, how long, no, what would be this off period? All right. Doctor's note, message is sent. Perfect. So we keep going through the same process here. And so here, what would you say? Would you provide some sort of different options, like two different options, I suppose?
Yeah, I think we should probably provide kind of two. So this is basically asking how long until you return to work. I think we can provide two different options for like minor illnesses and slightly more complex. So say like more than 3 days or less than 3 days.
Yeah, I was going to say most of the bots or the clients I've seen working on this would typically have, like you said, two branches in this, because you would need to alert a wider audience within the company if someone is off for more than a couple of days, because that just sort of stops the machine a little bit. And so, yeah, you need to contact HR if you are off for, let's say, a week, a full week, or 2 weeks if you've broken a foot or something and you can't go to work. You would need to alarm someone, maybe more higher up or wider audience, who's going to have to take some steps to go within the company and alert different people, key people, move things around, shuffle things around, because you're not going to be present. But if you're only going to be away for 1 day or 2 days or 3 days, it's most likely that you can just tell your line manager, and that should be more than enough. So we're going to do that branching here, which we discussed before. So again, we're going to use a quick reply because that just makes sense. And so what do we want to say? How long do you expect to be off? Less than 3 days, more than 3 days. Would that make sense?
Yeah, that all makes sense to me there. Just keeping it nice and simple again so that the users can be easily guided through. I think it's especially important if they are, say, feeling sick. You don't want to be bombarded with a billion options and expected to type a million things.
Okay, perfect. So I'm going to create this conversation here. Perfect. Okay. And so now we obviously created the skeleton of this central conversation here, and now we're going to have this branching, which in your chart here you've stipulated, like, inform the line manager, or over 3 days inform line manager and HR. So obviously we're going to have to contact different people here. So let's just do this one by one first. We'll build the conversation structure first, and then we're going to do these little pointing the chatbot to send this information in different directions based on where we are. So let's just do less than 3 days first. So a message is sent, so we'll continue just like that. Perfect. Okay, so what do you want to say here? So we're going to say, okay, thank you for letting us know. And then I might add another message here. I have alerted your line manager. Please get well soon. Okay, we have very empathetic chatbots at ubisend. So this would be number one. So if they say less than 3 days, we're going to move there. So now, as you noticed, so far what we've done is we've always added a message below the conversation. So we keep building this flow in this very one directional flow. But what we have as well is, if you've noticed, there's a little plus button on the side of these messages, which means that basically I can add another message, another branch to this conversation based on what the previous answer was, or all sorts of transitions, which we can discuss in a minute. And so obviously here, what I want to do is I want to do less than 3 days, and then I want to do more than 3 days. So it's obviously going to be on the same playing field of the conversation step that we want to do this. So more than 3 days. I said less than that, so over. I don't really know. Over 3 days. Okay. Next message. Okay. Thank you for letting me know. I have alerted your line manager.
Just thinking as we type this step here, if it's, say, like longer than 3 days, this might be a period where, say, a business wants to kind of gather an expected return to work date from the client. So because obviously it could be, say, 4 or 5 days, or it could be 2-3 weeks.
Okay, that's a good point. Okay, we can do that. Okay, thanks for letting me know. When do you expect to, would you, please enter a date at which, oops, I can't type, you would expect to be back, question mark, not question mark, because that's not a question. And so we're going to use here what Jacob's throwing a little spanner in the work here is he's going to request the user to actually enter a date. Like I mentioned earlier, we have message types and we have composer types. Message types are all of the things, all of the different formats that we could ask the that we could present these different messages. So they look slightly different. They have slightly different purposes, like a video or an image, etc. The composer type is the different types of input field that the user could use whilst using the bot. So it's going to make a lot more sense once we go through this. But basically here, as a composer type, we could add use a date composer type. So when the user gets to this specific step, what they'll be presented with is a way to enter a date that's really, really simple. So we're going to save that. All right. Okay, so here we have the structure of this conversation. Now, if you've followed the previous sessions we've done, you'll probably notice that here we have a bit of a problem. So we have less than 3 days, more than 3 days, but the transition from this previous message to these messages is just a message is sent. So there's no separation here, which doesn't make sense, obviously. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that when the user clicks less than 3 days, it goes to the less than 3 days side, and more than 3 days goes to the more than 3 days side. So what we're going to do is not go here, we're going to go here, and we're going to go through transition to less than 3 days when a message equals less than 3 days. Save that. Over 3 days, I'm just going to have double check what I actually wrote. Less than 3 days, more than 3 days. Perfect. Transition to over 3 days, a message is sent that is equal to more than 3 days. Okay, so what I've done here is I've used the transition section of the conversational step. The transition, like I mentioned at the very start of the video, is how you move the user or the employee or the chatbot user from one step to the next. So what does the user need to do to move from step 1 to step 2, or from step 1 to step 2B or step 2A. And in this instance, because we're presenting the user with these two buttons here, what we basically want us to say is when they hit this button, which says less than 3 days, they're going to go to the less than 3 days step. If they hit the more than 3 days step, they go to the next to the over 3 days step. Hopefully that makes sense. Now, what we want to do now is probably just have a little check just to make sure that everything is working properly. So I've done this before earlier in the recording, in the session. We basically have obviously this demo section of the platform, which allows us to test the bot, make sure that everything's working properly. So that's what we're going to do. So for those who were here from the start, as you remember, we've put a keyword as the start of this conversation, and here we are. So the keyword was just TC7, just for just to make this easier. And so we're going to just notify that we have the flu. ISO certifying, yep. Do you have a doctor's note? Yep. How long do you expect to be off? What did I say? Flu, I guess less than 3 days. Okay, thank you for letting me know. I have alerted your line manager. Please get well soon. Perfect. Now we can go back through this whole thing again and just make sure that the other branch is working as well. So TC7, this time I have, I'd rather not say. Yep. No, doesn't matter. And then now I'm going to be off for more than 3 days. And so my bot is just going to tell me, thank you for letting us know. Please enter a date at which you expect to be back. So if you remember, I changed this composer type to date. So as you can see here, I can't actually type anything. It just now says click to choose a date. So if I click this, I can tell my bot, I'll expect to be back on the 19th and send that across. Okay, so again, it doesn't answer anything here because I didn't finish this conversation. So we're going to go back and finish that now. But as you can see, I've just told my bot 19th of January, I expect to be back at that date. Does all of this make sense, Jacob?
Yeah, it does indeed. So looking at this kind of branch in particular, the user's been able to go through, let the bot know the fact that they're ill and when they expect to be back. I think it's also worth pointing out, because I think we often forget that obviously a lot of the time, say in a HR sense, you'll often have this hooked up to the chatbot, hooked up to your HRMS, so the chatbot will already know who which employee. I can't falling over my words like no tomorrow today, but who the user is essentially what I'm trying to say, but making a terrible job at it.
Yeah, absolutely. So you will be integrated with your SuccessFactors, your workplace, Workday, sorry, all of these sort of HRMS, which will allow your bot to know already that this is Alex, who works in marketing at ubisend, and his line manager is Dean or something like that. So it will already know all of these things. Now, we obviously didn't finish this conversation here, because the only thing that I have here is I'm sending a date, and then the bot just sort of like tells me that he doesn't really know what to do. So I'm going to go back, because it's just going to hurt my brain if we don't do it. I'm going to go back and just going to finish this. So I'm going to add another step here, which is a step after the person has sent their date, which is just going to say, no problem, HR contacted, or something like that. So a date is sent. I'm just going to do, yeah, so a message is a date that's sent to us, perfect. And the bot is just going to say, okay, I've alerted HR and your line manager that you will be off until the date. So now I'm doing something sneaky, which is I'm just putting a placeholder here, because what we're going to do is we're going to go and change that first of all, because that's pointing from the wrong one. Sorry. So it's pointing from the less than 3 days, but obviously we don't want that. So we just want to delete this transition here. No, I've unlinked all my steps. So I'm going to go back to doing that. To self-satisfying, not this one. Transition to gather sequence details.
So just a kind of little run through here of obviously when you have unlinked steps, it's where, say, a user, you had a step in a conversation, say step 3, and as you've deleted it or moved how the user then progresses to step 4A or 4B, then the chatbot will kind of get lost in the conversation. So what Alex has just run into is kind of a little like warning sign, just so you know when you are building the conversation, if you do change something around, you'll get a little notification to say, actually, users might get stuck in this conversation now. Just make sure and go back through and make sure everything's linked up correctly to ensure no one gets kind of stuck in the same repetitive flow.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. So basically what I've done is I messed up this section here, where I've said from this step instead of the next step, instead of the other step, back at work on date. All right, cool. So this should work now. We should be back in the game. Okay, perfect. So what I've done here is I've obviously asked the user to enter a date, and then once they enter this date, we're going to reply to the user saying, okay, your line manager and HR have been contacted, that you will be back at work on date. So obviously this isn't going to display anything. What we want to use here is we want to use some variables. So variables are little bits of, I guess, what would you call it? I guess variables. Variables is probably the right word for it. It's these little words or succession of words that you can use to store data in. So that's really helpful. So if you've ever filled out a form on a website, for instance, where you enter your first name, your last name, your email address, all of these will be basically mapped to variables, one for your name, one for your last name, and one for your email address, which then your the website you've just used or the company you've just filled out the form for is going to use these fields or these variables to basically present hello first name or hello Alex. And so here what we want to do is we want to do comeback date, for instance. So this is creating a variable called comeback date in which we can store some value. You can create as many variables as you'd like within the ubisend platform, which is very, very helpful because it allows you to create incredibly vast experiences, collecting a lot of data from your employees, which could be very helpful as well. And so here I've just created this brand new variable. And if I go back to the conversation builder, I can go into here. I can go into the very last step. And so here what we're doing is we're going to tell the bot that whatever the user answers to this specific question, we want to store that as comeback date. So in the transition, again, we want to say, save this message as comeback date. Save that. Okay, that's now successfully saved. So as you can see, this new little thing has appeared in the transition from this message to this message, which means that it's going to now store whatever the user is answering under the comeback date variable. And now what I can do is I can replace this fake message here that I've put with the actual variable. And so I can just do these curly little brackets, which is what brings up this little drop down, and just say comeback date. Save. Perfect. And now we have, I would say, probably a really helpful conversation. Would you say, Jacob? Would you be happy with this?
Sorry, I'm just coughing there. Yeah, I think so, definitely. It's guiding the user through. It's kind of throwing in a few variables to kind of make sure the user definitely knows it understood when they're back and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. So what I want to do really quickly, because I know that we're 2 minutes out of finishing this, I want to show you the email integration because that could actually be quite helpful. So obviously, as part of the integrations, within the ubisend platform, you can integrate any third-party software you'd like. As long as it has an API, we can connect to it. So that's sort of our USP. Now, part of this is the emails. The emails have their own standalone little section within the ubisend platform. And you can basically create templated emails that your bot is going to send to various different people, depending on the step at which they've been triggered. So for this specific use case, we obviously have this whole data gathering conversational process, which ends with informing someone. So obviously on the left side, we need to inform the line manager. On the right side, we need to inform not only the line manager, but also the wider HR people. And so we want to create here two different emails. So this one will be sent from HR Chatbot at ubisend.com. So this is just an email address that I'm making up, obviously. HR Chatbot from name that's random as well. And then this one we're going to do, this is to our line manager at ubisend.com with your employee is off sick. Hello. Your employee, as you remember, if you were here a little while back, the bot will already know who your employee is, so we can just use this sort of variable placeholder here. Your employee name, I'm just going to do that. Is going to be off sick for up to 3 days starting today. Please be aware. Or whatever. So we can do that. So we can collect this information. Now, what we could do as well is, we won't have time now, but we could, with every step of the conversation, log the information into a different variable. So do they have a doctor's note? Yes or no, logged into a variable. Are they self-certifying? Yes or no, log into a variable. What kind of sickness do they have? Log that into a variable. And we could present all of these here. So we could say self-serving, certifying, no, sorry, I keep saying self-serving, certifying, and then, the variable, etc. But we don't really have time to do this here. So I'm going to skip that, but you can see that this could be valuable information for, maybe not for the line manager, but for HR, it might be valuable for them to log that information. And so, okay, so this one is for the line manager, so I'm just going to save that. And then this one is for from the HR chatbot again at ubisend.com, from HR chatbot to HR at ubisend.com, and line manager at ubisend.com. Alert, sick employee. Okay, hello HR. This employee, again, we can use this fake variable, which we haven't created, so it doesn't really matter, will be off sick for quite a while. They expect to be back by comeback date. Please inform the relevant parties. I can't type when people are looking at me, and there's like 110 people watching.
Especially when you start to kind of run out of time in the video.
I know. I'm trying to go really quickly, and I'm messing things up. So I'm just going to do this. Okay, perfect. All right, so we have two emails, one going to HR, one going to the line manager. And what we basically want to do now is tie these to the different steps within the conversation. So we have left step, which is going to the line manager. So we can go options here, go into the email section and just basically tie an email here. So your employee is off sick, save that. Success. And then on the right, we need to inform HR at this step. So we're going to say add an email, sick employee, which is the HR one. Perfect. Close that. Okay. And now basically, depending on which way the user goes, the right people is going to get an email alerting them of the sick employee and notifying them of the next steps to take. Done.
I'm very impressed, especially towards the end that you started talking at 1,000 miles an hour there.
I mean, it's not that impressive for myself. It's more impressive if people have actually managed to follow this, which seems like it's about a 50-50 based on the chat that I'm reading. So hopefully this is all going to be a video as well. So please don't be too worried if you didn't follow the last bits. You can go back and watch the video later on. Sorry, I cut you off, Jacob. Go ahead.
No, that's all right. Yeah, I was basically going to say it's exactly the same thing as you there. I will also say, as we approach the end of the video, as always, if you do ever have any, say, processes you want to see turned into a chatbot or any kind of topics or specific questions, either throw them down into the chat now and we'll log them in for future weeks, or just ping us over an email and we'll be able to crack on with them in future videos.
Yeah, perfect. So yeah, like I said, this is, like we said at the start, this is a very, very specific workflow that we've just worked through. It's very, very processized. So it's really one step to the next. There's loads of stuff we could do to improve this. So a couple of stuff I would do, I would recommend to improve this, for instance, would be just changing, tying variables to specific step changes, which could be very, very helpful when you try to move this information to the right people. So that would be one thing. So between this step and this step, for instance, logging the sickness into one variable. Other things you could do is mark some information as sensitive so that the bot doesn't store that information. It could be very, very helpful for this particular step. So we might be dealing with very personal details here, and we might not want these details displayed within the CMS of the platform. And so one way we allow you to prevent that is by just marking a step as sensitive, which means that the bot can still use that data to do things. So it doesn't prevent them from doing any, it doesn't prevent the bot or the platform from using the data. It just prevents it from displaying it to everyone who might be using the platform, be it an intern testing the bot or anyone else. So that could be very helpful. Other things that we could do, we could stop the users from having access to an input field. So that could be helpful for instance, for this step, where we really want them to very specifically specify us whether it's going to be less than 3 days or over 3 days. So while at this step previously, we wanted to allow them to have this free text just in case they had something we didn't really expect them to answer. At this very step, we don't necessarily need them to enter anything else. We actually actively want to prevent that. And so we have an option within the platform to actually use a composer type, which would be hidden, which means that the user cannot actually type anything. It just would just be click this button or that button. And then, yeah, this is one process out of many, many processes that you'll probably have within your chatbot platform. As an HR chatbot, you'll probably want to deal with this and many, many others. And so whilst you expand your chatbot's knowledge and your chatbot's all of the processes it can handle, you'll want to obviously start thinking of how these processes talk to each other, potentially from, let's say, from the over 3 days. Maybe you want to tie another process to that, which would be like actually meet with someone at HR or a health professional on your day back. So there's all sorts of things that you can do there as well to expand upon this. Okay, I've run out by 6 minutes, so thank you all for attending. I know this one went on a little bit longer than usual, but hopefully that was insightful. Again, let us know if you'd like us to work on anything next week. So we'll do another session next Tuesday at 1 o'clock UK time. They are always recorded, so if you miss it, don't worry too much. But we'd love to have you on. If you want to join us and you're watching this as a recording, join us at ubisend.com/drop-in. And we'll be really happy to have you. Don't say goodbye, Jacob. Be polite and say goodbye.
Sorry. I think I was on mute there, or my laptop started playing up a little bit. But yeah, thank you for watching as always. And again, if you are watching on YouTube, feel free to hit a subscribe down there on the channel. We're obviously releasing new content all the time. Obviously the Think Chatbots every week, and then also we've got more kind of in-depth and sometimes slightly lighter weight videos as well, just around HR content and chatbots in general. So feel free to check out the YouTube channel and hit subscribe. And it's been a pleasure doing this with you. Thank you for your time as always, Alex.
Thank you. All right. Bye-bye.